Welcome to Learning with the Cleveland Orchestra. My name is Rose Breckenridge, and I'm lecturing for the Cleveland Orchestra series Music in Depth. Today we're looking at Mozart and his Clarinet Quintet in A major. I'll be talking about Mozart's life and his musical style, and I'll give you background for the Clarinet Quintet, plus a musical tour of the piece. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart lived from 1756 to 1791. His middle name Amadeus is Latin for beloved of God. Mozart also used Amédée, the French version. He was born in Salzburg, the son of an esteemed composer-violinist at the court of the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg. Mozart was a child prodigy. He learned to play the harpsichord when he was only 3, just by listening to his older sister Nannerl play. So his father Leopold noticed and began to train Mozart quite carefully. When he was just 6 years old, Mozart was so accomplished that he played before the Empress Maria Theresa. His father then took Mozart and the family, with permission, of course, from the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg. He took them on an extended tour around Europe. The boy played for Louis XV at Versailles and for George III in London. By the time he was 13, Mozart had actually composed concertos, symphonies, chamber music, religious works, and operas. As a teenager, Mozart went 3 times with his father to Italy. He loved opera, and Italy, of course, was the birthplace of opera. And in Salzburg, that was a small mountain town with no opera house. So Mozart reached manhood with a mastery of all creative musical forms and a renowned ability to compose with exceeding speed and great creativity. In Salzburg, Mozart chafed under the patronage system of the day. He lamented how the Prince Archbishop treated his court musicians there in Salzburg by seating them below the cooks at the servants' table. He was eager to leave Salzburg, and he finally convinced his father to allow him to travel Europe in search of a job. The father agreed only on the condition that the mother, Anna Maria, would accompany their son as chaperone. While they were in Paris, sadly, his mother caught pneumonia and died. This was a terrible tragedy that was quite difficult for Mozart to convey when he returned home to his father. Back in Salzburg, Mozart continued to suffer under what he regarded as the tyranny of his patron, the Prince Archbishop. Eventually, the hostile situation escalated into a nasty quarrel, and they parted ways. Much to his father's chagrin and, frankly, outright disapproval, Mozart went off to the big city of Vienna at age 25 in 1781 to seek his fortune. He fell in love there with the pretty young singer Constance Weber. His father strongly disapproved of the match, but Mozart married her anyway in 1782. To support his wife and growing family as a freelance musician now, Mozart decided to compose concertos for the pianoforte. This was a newer keyboard instrument replacing the harpsichord at that time. But Mozart was not only the composer of these piano concertos, but also their performer and also the producer of the concerts where they were played. He was quite successful in this endeavor, at least at first, because eventually his popularity began to wane and financial difficulties set in. Then his father's death in 1787 devastated him, and he fell into a depression. But by 1791, his fortunes were beginning to improve. Unfortunately, later in the year, he fell very seriously ill and died in December of 1791 without completing his last commissioned work, the Requiem. Well, what about his musical style? Mozart's musical style was actually the culmination of 3 great traditions: the genius of Italian vocal melody, the grace of French elegant clarity of color, and the advanced ideas of German orchestral form. He excelled in the use of dramatic musical dualism, where he would pit solos, be they voice or instrument, against the larger orchestral ensemble, string color against wind color, homophony against counterpoint, main single melodies against many melodies at the same time, and regular diatonic harmony pitted against chromaticism. He contributed masterpieces to all the major forms of music. To name a few, in his few short life, he wrote 10 string quartets at the end of his life that are now considered to be the finest in the literature. He led the way, as I mentioned, in developing the piano concerto, composing 27 altogether, and he brought the symphonic form that was becoming popular in his day to its highest peak at the time with his last 3 symphonies, numbers 39, 40, and 41. But his supreme love was for opera, and all of his operas written during the Vienna years from 1781 to 1791 are masterpieces that continue to be performed throughout the world every year. Well, what about the Clarinet Quintet in A major? This piece has a wonderful story. He composed it in 1789 for a string quartet and a clarinet, string quartet, 2 violins, viola, and cello. And his close friend Anton Stadler was the clarinetist. Now, Mozart's friendship with Stadler had blossomed during the Vienna years. They were both members of the same Masonic lodge. And Stadler was a very unique and accomplished performer of this newer instrument of the clarinet. And he helped Mozart see the musical potential of the instrument, the clarinet's wide range, its ability to sing long, slow, melodic lines, or race quickly, its various tone colors, the warm and dark color of the lower Shalom register against the bright and even sometimes piercing, but always clear color in the higher registers. So inspired by the clarinet's potential that Stadler helped reveal to Mozart, Mozart composed multiple works for the clarinet for Stadler to play, including not only this Clarinet Quintet that was from 1789, but also 2 years later, his very masterful Clarinet Concerto in 1791. Mozart completed this work in September of 1789. It was first performed in December of the same year at a concert there in Vienna put on by the Musicians' Society for the benefit of widows and orphans. And both Stadler and Mozart performed. Stadler, of course, on the clarinet, and Mozart on the viola. We also know from records that Joseph Sittler played the first violin. Scholars think that Stadler actually played this work on what's called a basset clarinet. This was a special clarinet that Stadler had built for himself, and this basset clarinet had an extended lower range. Unfortunately, the original Clarinet Quintet manuscript has been lost, and so the work that we know today as the Clarinet Quintet in A major has actually been reconstructed from fragments and also from first printings. It was actually published in 1802, and now the work is usually played on a modern clarinet. How did that score get lost? Well, there's a few theories. After Mozart's premature death in 1791, his widow actually asked Stadler for the manuscript. She wanted to have it to sell to help pay off Mozart's debt. Now, according to Constance, Stadler said, "Oh, I can't give you the score. It was stolen." But Constance didn't believe him. She always thought that he may have pawned it to help his own financial situation. So before Stadler and Mozart, the clarinet, it was actually invented around 1700 by Johann Denner, It was rarely used as a solo instrument in either the orchestra or a smaller chamber group. But Statler was such an accomplished performer of the instrument, and Mozart was so creative in realizing the potential of the clarinet. Both of them changed that situation, and the clarinet became, because of them, increasingly used for solo work. In the quintet, however, this is not a mini concerto. Rather, the clarinet in this work is the first among equals and often shares melodic lines with the other voices within a regular string quartet structure, namely a fast opening sonata movement, a slow second movement, a minuet dance for the third movement, and then a finale. Now, it is, as I mentioned, in A major, and we usually think of major, and especially A major, as a very bright key. But as we listen to this work, we'll notice moments where the music is colored with a more, let's say, autumnal, wistful quality, and that may in turn reflect its context. At the time in Europe in 1789, England was still recovering from its war with America, the American Revolution. And of course, in 1789, the bloody French Revolution was raging. In his personal life, Mozart also was suffering difficulties. I mentioned already his depression after his father died. And in 1789, his wife, Constance, was very, very ill. And again, as I already mentioned, his career seemed to be in great trouble. So we'll listen for those autumnal moments as we embark on our musical tour. The first movement, Allegro, in A major, is in sonata form, where we're going to meet several themes, and then they'll be developed kind of like the rising action of a play, and then reprised. It is in A major, but again, there will be wistful moments. And the Allegro, especially in the opening theme, is really a not so fast Allegro. That opening theme is introduced by the strings, and then the clarinet sort of tags along with a response at the end. The next theme, the second theme, is going to be introduced by the violin in a higher major key, but the clarinet is going to repeat that melody, moving it into that more melancholy minor. So let's hear that idea. Now, the third theme is actually a kind of a dialogue between the strings and the clarinet, and at the end, they recall the opening theme. So let's hear that. Now, in the mid-section of the movement, of course, Mozart's going to play around with those ideas. And I want to play a little section towards the end of the midsection where the clarinet comes forth in a transition passage with striking and very rapid key changes that will lead us back to the return of the opening theme. Here's that. Now, in the second movement, Larghetto, very slow, and move to a neighboring major key, D major, the clarinet will be featured mainly as a soloist, some dialogue with the other voices, but absolutely, definitely featured. So we open here with this long breathe and lyric clarinet melody. Now that melody's extended, there's a little more rhythmic interest and harmonic movement in it, the extension. Here's that. Don't you love that sidestep to an unexpected chord? Now our next idea coming up, the violin and the clarinet dialogue before they join forces. I particularly like in this movement the transition back to the opening theme's return, and it's there that the clarinet is featured with great, wonderful grace, leading us back to that reprise. So let's hear a little bit of that. So you hear Mozart kind of gave the clarinet a tiny, tiny cadenza there. The third movement, Minuetto, returns to A major. That's an aristocratic dance in 3/4 time. And it opens with the full quintet, clarinet and the 4 stringed instruments, stating the minuet theme with a strong, strong 3/4 tempo. Now, normally in a minuet, there's a contrasting section in the middle with smaller forces called the trio. And here, this traditional form will have that, but Mozart departs because normally when the minuet returns after the trio, that's it, it's over. But Mozart's going to give us 2 trios. The first trio is actually in A minor, and the clarinet disappears and the strings are featured in this minor key trio number 1. So let's hear. As you heard, the first violin was leading there. So normally the minuet would return and that would be it. But as I said, Mozart gives us a second trio. And in the second trio, he brings the clarinet back and gives it the lead role and moves us back to a major key. The clarinet here is going to be featured in playing a folk dance type melody, the Austrian Landler, that was very popular in Austria. So let's hear that. Of course, at the end, the minuet will finally close it all up. The fourth movement, Allegretto, normally finales in those times were rondos, dances with refrains that kept coming back again and again. But Mozart departs here and makes a set of theme and variations. That's a wonderful form to listen to because you get a catchy tune and it keeps coming back again and again, but in disguise because the composer uses different tricks of the trade, making melodic variations, rhythmic variations, harmonic variations to help us enjoy the theme in its new disguise. The theme itself is quite lively, announced in violins with a staccato detached articulation, we call it. And there's this little motif in there that's catchy that I want you to notice that uses what we call a dotted rhythm, long, long, long. So here is our theme for the finale. Da-da-da-da-dum-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. That's that dotted idea. Now, the first variation, the theme is repeated, but it's underneath, and the clarinet is going to steal the stage with a beautiful counter melody. So here is variation 1. Now, of course, I can't play the entire variation or even the entire theme, but it gives you the idea. Our second variation, the violin leads, and there's going to be a much more agitated accompaniment when we're still in A major. So let's hear a little bit of the beginning of our second variation. Here it comes. It's a foil that underneath rapid figure, and then the clarinet kind of floats in slowly. The third variation switches to minor key, and the viola is going to actually lead. And in this variation, remember, Mozart played the viola at the premiere. So in the premiere, he got to shine as a soloist. So here is our minor key third variation. So into this bright finale creeps a little bit of that autumnal, more wistful feel that comes into color periodically. The fourth variation is going to showcase the clarinet racing along with very difficult to play, virtuosic, fast 16th notes, and then the violin is actually going to echo it. So here is the beginning of variation 4 with our virtuosic display. You notice what a genius Mozart is at changing things up. So we're constantly engaged. And we'll see this also in the next variation, because here he slows the tempo way down to adagio and again calls on the lead singers, the violin and the clarinet. And they're actually going to trade places as the leader in this more meditative, if you will, fifth variation. Now, towards the end of the movement, Mozart gives us a coda, a final little section to wrap it all up. And he really speeds that tempo up to a very fast Allegro. And he's going to bring back a reprise of the theme in a form that's closer to its original version, but much fuller with a little added oomph in terms of the participation on the various instruments. Here it is. Now, in this coda, at the very end, there's a wonderful use of that little dotted motif I called your attention to earlier, the long, short, long, and he tosses it back and forth between the different instruments, and it leads to a very bright and happy close. Such a cheerful ending to a great piece. I hope you get a chance to hear the whole thing. My name is Rose Breckenridge.